I wanted to provide an opportunity for us to, uh, converse and share some stories about Herb Squire. Um, all I'm going to say is, I didn't meet Herb early in my career. I wish I had. Um, when I was asked to go meet up with him to do some work, I was like, oh, I'm going to meet the Herb Squire. Uh, how is this going to go? I didn't know what to expect. What a gentleman, and how easy to work with. And I can only imagine how he treated those before me that worked with him, including Rodney and Dave Bialik and anybody else that I may be missing. So, uh, Lori, I'm sorry for your loss. I pray for you that you get through this. I know he's in a better place working on something new right now and figuring out how to make technology better. So,
Like always says, how to make ends meet.
well, that is true as well. Uh, if I may, I'd like to lead off and uh, let Dave Bialik start off here. Dave.
Well, when Lori called me as I was getting on the plane to NAB, I was heartbroken that Herb had taken a turn for the worse. And then later on in the show, she contacted me to tell me Herb left. And as many of you saw, I was literally crying in the middle of the floor. I met Herb. I must have been around 20 or 21 years old when I was still in college in Washington, D.C. Met him at an event at the NAB headquarters, and we just started talking, and we became good friends for more years than I want to admit. Lori, I think it was close to 40 years. um, Herb has did amazing things. Number one, at WOR, as many of us listen to the old CBS Mystery Theaters on WOR, it's because of Herb that we heard it in better quality than any other radio station, because Herb went and took the lines and equalized them himself, since he couldn't get an equalized line from to CBS to WOR. He went and put equalizers on and did it. That's one thing. Herb was the engineer for Gene Shepard and Bob and Ray. I mean, legendary stuff. And then he went on to WHN and one of the last great music AM stations, and then to WQXR and WQEW. Herb and I, our paths crossed many times. He tried getting me to work for him once, but I had this thing against unions, so I wouldn't do it. Whenever I was in a jam, I could call Herb. Herb was there. But guess what? Herb was not the average engineer who would always talk. Herb was a very shy and humble guy. If you asked him a question, he would tell you, but he was never the first to volunteer anything. He was a diplomat. One of the first discussions we had was about AM stereo, and God knows that was a debate. And I was on the losing side, but so was the rest of the world. Herb, if he didn't know something, he would say he didn't know it, but then he would call you the next day and say, here's the answer. When I was running the New York SBE for, I guess it was around 10 years between the 80s and the 90s, Herb always made sure that we had a home. the WQXR auditorium. If I ever was down for a speaker, Herb would suggest, or I would draft him. And I also was a bit of a pusher. I'm the one that pushed him to do the paper on cascading algorithms. Uh, when that came up, he showed me in his studios, and I said, "You got to do a paper." And he goes, "No, that's for someone else." I pushed him to do it. He built one of the best facilities for radio in New York. That probably the last great radio palace, the WQXR facility. Uh, he literally would tell you, it took over an hour for him to describe how he mounted the turntables to the building steel, and uh, how that was amazing. Uh, and most of all, I lost a friend, and that's the way I feel. I feel like I lost a brother.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Rodney, I know you spent a lot of time with Herb.
Everyone. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Bud, for putting this together. And I know there's more to come. Um, um, to my dear Lori, it was just a privilege. Um, you know how Herb and I felt about each other. I don't need to tell you about it, but I was honored to also be by your side as you sat Shiva last week. We had a good talk, and there's more to come. Hello to everyone on this board. Unfortunately, I don't attend most of these. I'm sitting in my office at work right now, still at work, and I'm honored to be amongst this group of engineers. And it's through this group of engineers that I met her at the aforementioned SBE meetings that Dave talked about. I believe it was in 85 or 86 was the first time I met Herb, and through attending one of the first meetings. Um, and I'd say there are about a good quarter of this call that I've met through those same meetings at the WQXR auditorium. One of my other friends and mentors, Dave Antoine, who's on this call, I met him for the first time at the SBE meetings. Of course, Mr. Bialik. I think you were president when I first started joining, but I don't remember. But it was soon thereafter you were president. So, but to have been raised by a dad who had a passion for classical music and bought what is now known as an audiophile system, and all my dad, there were two radio stations in town that my dad listened to, and one of them was QXR. So imagine years later when I'm standing in the WQXR auditorium attending an SBE meeting and meeting the chief engineer of WQXR. And then imagine later on when I am fortunate enough to be mentored by him, and then later on employed by him. And then imagine later on to have succeeded him at WQXR and have closed out WQXR under the New York Times ownership. And then imagine to have kept his friendship and mentorship through all of the years. And indirectly, I even gave Herb work, but it wasn't directly, it was through one of our vendors and contractors that, and he had to do field work and monitor points to finish up a proof for one of the stations I subsequently worked. Our relationship ran deep and long, and I was honored to share a birthday week with Herb, so we never missed a birthday greeting. And I was the last, I'd say, 5 years we even spoke every birthday. He called me or I called him. He never forgot my birthday, ever. As some of you intimately had a chance to know him as Happy Herbie, Happy Herbie was just that. smiling all the time, pleasant. Um, one of the greatest bosses I've ever had. But one of the people who I learned the most from in the industry, honored to have been under his tutelage, if you will, to be under his wing. And it wasn't so much the electronics and the how to do things, which I learned, but it was in the manner how to conduct yourself as an engineer in general and particularly in this market. If you're in this market, you're literally at the top of the game. And to survive in this market, as all of you on this call know, um, it's no small feat. Um, and to have the weight of working for a Herb Squire and then following in his footsteps later on with the weightiness of the facility that Dave described, I can tell you it was weighty. And every day I made it my business to keep that facility in the manner that it was built. And those of you who saw the QXR facility at the end, um, there were people who walked in the door who didn't even realize it was as old as it was at the end. It's because I painstakingly, um, hell, most of you remember the mahogany doors and walls of the outdoor or outer part of the studios. Those had to be oiled every year to maintain their sheen. And I had the honor of making sure that I continued to oil them and making sure that the contractor oiled them every year up until the end. The doors, there were unique door handles. If things started falling apart, some of the, Herb built a facility that broke the mold. So it was very difficult to find parts for things, for specific things once they broke. But I searched high and low to find parts to make sure that the facility always looked the way he designed it and the way he built it. I also had the honor of always hearing from Herb's predecessor, Doc Masumian. And for those of you who never met Doc, um, that's the only other greater engineer than Herb Squire was Doc Masumian in character and in knowledge. But Doc actually took the time to always give me a call until he died to just check in on me because he knew I was the chief of QXR and wanted to give me the words of encouragement that I needed to just keep going. And Herb did no less, he did more. So, if those of you who never had a chance to meet him in a very kindest way, you're lost. If you never had a chance to be employed by him, you're lost. If you never had a chance to be his friend, you're lost. Um, One of the geniuses in our industry, he would get a kick out of being able to take one of the original Alfred pieces. I think he would have bid highly for them since he was intimately involved in their installation and their design to begin with, or I should say upkeep of the newer master. But he knew as much. There wasn't hardly anybody left in town that knew as much about the Alfred antenna system than Herb did anyway. So he words can't say enough about this really sad time that we've crossed. I mean, we're born, we live, we die, but you know what? I cannot imagine a world. I don't want to imagine a world without Herb, and the only comfort that I have is what Dave said and Lori said about what he's doing right now. And I think he's running that great radio operation in the sky for sure. They probably couldn't wait for him to show up and say, "Hey, Herb, we're thinking about this, and what do you think about that? And how can we improve this?" And it's just I can't say enough words about the greatness of the man, and I'm honored to be among all of you today, and I'm honored to see legendary engineers and people on this call. I'm honored to see Jeff, whose dad is Jack Williams of PR&E fame, and Jeff himself, U.S. rep for Mika, and Yellow Tech. I'm honored to see Andy Bader, who I haven't seen in I don't know how long. But the great Andy Bader, another one of the legendary engineers in this town. But we're all surrounded by greatness. I was honored to be mentored by also David Antoine, who gave me some of the greatest advice I've ever had in my career in radio, also, and was a shepherd for me also. So again, I'm honored to be among this great legendary group, and we can all mourn together, but we can celebrate the life of Herb Squire together. And I look forward to attending more. I can't guarantee I'm going to attend SBE meetings, but I can guarantee if it has Herb's name on it, I will attend. So, Bud, all you have to do is say you're going to talk about Herb Squire every meeting, and I might attend every meeting then at this point. So, that'll be a way to get me.
Herb would have puns galore for this.
Oh, puns. Oh, my God. So I got to say that, you're right, Dave. This is one thing I said to Lori last week or I said it at her home during Shiva. There was only one person who could set up a pun and deliver it, and yet you still didn't know it was coming. Herb was the king of puns, and yet he got me every time. And I'm just like, Herb's a great guy, so I'm just thinking, I'm saying something innocently and whatnot, and boom, here comes Herb with a zinger right behind it. And it's like, he got me again. So yeah, so thanks for Dave for reminding me about the puns.
That's why he married me, because I could keep up with the puns.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And I never got mad at him for a pun either. Like, you think I would have heard enough puns on a daily basis. I never got mad at him for a pun. Good, bad, or indifferent. I love the pun. So, yeah.
Rodney, I can tell you one time Herb and I were driving back from Washington, D.C. after an AM stereo meeting, and I hit a pothole on the Verrazano and bent the wheel, and he just looks at me and he goes, "That's not good." Just like that.
Yeah, Herb could be the king of the understatement at times too. Yeah, good times. But yeah, honored and blessed to know the legend, and who, while I was with him, by the way, one last thing, while I was with Herb, I knew he was a legend. I knew he was the great Herb Squire, but he made me feel so at ease that most of the time I never looked at him that way. I looked at him as just a great human being, a great engineer. But the daunting, if I had to think about how great he was, I probably wouldn't have gone to work most days. So, because I would have been too intimidated and too horrified to know that, hey, am I doing good enough? Am I impressing him enough? Am I doing well enough? But he wasn't. Most of you who knew him personally, he wasn't that way at all. But that was stuff I had in my own head. But fortunately I didn't think of it most of the time. But what I did do is I made sure that I upheld the standards that he created every day. And what I can tell you is that as an engineer still in this town, that's what I'm doing every day, is upholding the standards that he helped teach me and set forth for me. And that's why I can continue doing the things I'm doing. So thank you for the time, everybody.
So Rodney, what is your position right now?
Oh, well, as of a month ago, I'm no longer, this is the first time in my career I'm not associated with a local radio station. So about a month ago, the Walt Disney Company stopped distributing content for we changed so many call letters, but 98.7, WEPN FM, WEPN AM, and in its last 2 months, WHSQ, which was the old News 88, the former News 88. So we just closed the Walt Disney campus on 66th Street. And as a result of that happening, the new owners of those stations of ESPN New York, they built their own facility. And so, and they have their own staff. And that's one thing I don't do anymore is so for the first time in over 4 years, I'm not associated with a local New York radio station. However, I still am the day-to-day technical manager for the ESPN radio network or supporting the ESPN radio network. So if you don't hear any ESPN radio, you can blame me. And I'm trying my best to make sure that doesn't happen. And I also manage one of our TV studios in New York for ESPN. I'm this systems manager for our South Street Seaport location where I am right now. So that's what I actively do currently for the Walt Disney Company. So I work for the Walt
And
Disney.
would you have been prepared for that
No,
without learning?
no. Nothing that my foundation, and by the way, I'd been in radio 10 years before I started working for WQXR. So, and I ran through the greats, right? And then even while I was working for QXR, I freelanced always for other people. I freelanced for iHeart for years. And I freelanced for others for years. But it's the foundational instruction that I received at WQXR that laid the foundation for what I'm doing now. And to be quite honest with you, I'm glad you brought that up, but I'm sorry for hogging up so much time. But I lived partially on the halo factor of Herb Squire and WQXR. Had I not worked for WQXR and Herb Squire, I might not be doing what I'm doing now. I might not have been employable that way. But it's because of that halo factor that somehow all the other employers in town knew, oh, you worked for WQXR. Oh, you worked for Herb. Oh. And there was a different thing about that laid the groundwork for everything I did subsequently. So yes, to answer your question, thank you for asking that and saying that. But yeah.
So let me ask you this, and this is something I feel strong about. You'll see, in my involvement with SBE here and with Andy's help, we're trying hard to nurture young talent like Lee Cusack, who's sitting next to Andy. I feel strong about that. That's why we want the sale of those antenna bays to support an educational purpose. What do you have somebody under you right now that you feel you're mentoring? That you're
so it's funny. I'm glad you brought that up. And Andy, you're always mentoring, you're always teaching. So what else is new? All right.
right.
Great. You braggart. Great. Anyway, no, Andy and I, we Josh. So again, the mentorship that I had under Herb, the mentorship that I've had from other chief engineers in this town. My first boss in radio was Bill Krause, for those of you who know that name. The mentorship that I've had with guys like Andy, even though I never worked for Andy really, but being around him, having conversations with him, invaluable, right? Having David Antoine is not just a mentor, but a friend, right? For him to give me advice as a young engineer and to help me, if I have an idea and he tell me what to do and what not to do and say, hey, maybe you want to think about it this way, invaluable, right? Those are things that I carry with me for forever. So I believe in paying it forward. So actually, in the New York Times, in Disney, actually my boss actually connected me with a young systems engineer who worked for another division of ours in Texas, based in Texas, And I mentored him for a while, not just on engineering. I didn't have to teach him about engineering, but it was about more about engineering politics, right? And a lot of us know what company politics can be. It's as much part of the job as anything else. If we could just do engineering all day long, we'd be great. Leave us alone and just let us engineer. Great. That's what we do. Send us in the corner, send us in the field, let us engineer. Unfortunately, there's politics that comes with every role. And so being able to give this young man some tools that he might have needed to go out, he successfully then left the Walt Disney Company and started his own company, right? There are other people that I've mentored, whether they were interns or other people that I met over the years, that I'm happy to say that they're still in my life and they've gone on to be successful people. I'm not bragging. I don't want to say this, but one of my mentors, one of the people that I mentored was Josh Haddon. I taught Josh Haddon how to do remotes at 19 years old, and years later, he paid it back by hiring me to be his remote engineer when he took over at iHeart exclusively for many years. He says, "Look, you taught me how to do remotes. You know how to do remotes. I need these remotes done. I'm not trusting anybody else to do them." Okay, great. So it's like a full circle thing, right? And we know how incestuous the business is and can be, right? So I strongly do believe in mentorship, and I have participated in mentorship on several levels in several different ways, both professionally, formally, and informally. But it's about paying it forward. There are two young ladies in my life that were coworkers. I consider them my daughters now, right? I recognized something in them that spoke to me because they were almost like me. They had this work ethic that was very close to my work ethic, and they adopted me, and I adopted them. And it's that kind of thing where you're always you want to find people. If you find people that are interested, they ask you questions. You ask them questions. You answer their questions. And so I strongly believe in that. Absolutely. So thanks for asking me that, Bud.
No, I'm. We all need to do it. Everybody in this group, uh, no matter how humble you may be, you're here for a reason. I feel blessed to be with you guys. The guy from upstate New York, originally a Long Islander though, but I, I appreciate everything you said. And Rodney, you are always welcome to our meetings. I know you're a busy man, but yes, I will whisper in your ear now that I can, and I will. There are things coming up that I know it will be worth joining us for, and stepping away from your responsibility. So thank you for your
Appreciate your,
comments.
I appreciate your kind words and your offer, and I'm supporting from afar. I pay my dues every year, sometimes
Yeah,
on time, sometimes not. But I appreciate your kind words and giving me the opportunity to share with this wonderful group some remembrances about Herb Squire. So thank you.
not a problem. Uh, yeah, I did see Andy Bader on here. I've uh, Jeff Williams. Who's next? Who would like to have the floor?
Hey, Bud, one thing that Herb always bragged about was that he had serial number one of the PR&E console sitting in his attic all the time. And that came from Jeff's father.
Yep. Yep.
May I add
Was
something about?
was that? I'm sorry, Lori. Was that circa from WOR also?
Yeah, it would have been.
Yeah, that was from OR. Yep, I remember that.
Right.
Okay.
But for Jeff, please tell your parents about her, because I'm thinking, oh my God, I didn't contact Ellen. I had to go through Herb's clothing and keep what I felt meant the most. And one of the items I kept was a PR&E golf shirt.
Wow.
In fact, I packed it away today. That meant something to him, so it meant something to me. So it's packed away very carefully, along with
Good.
his early Long Island days DJ jacket when he was a WPAC Beach Boy as Happy Herbie.
That's great. No, I spoke to my parents last week. Sadly, they came down with a cold as of earlier this week, but I did inform my father to be available for this Zoom, but I don't think he made it. But no, I appreciate the comments and everything, and I've seen a lot of people go out there and say they have at least top 10 versions of the BMX somewhere parked in their locations. I think number 3 is with Shotgun Tom Kelly, which happens to be one of the original ones from a station in Phoenix.
And Herb took a lot of video, and we digitalized it, and I've got videos of us and our kids when they were like 7, 8 years old out in San Diego touring while all the studio equipment was being constructed. So I've got video of walking around and looking at the equipment.
Nice. That'd be great to re-see again. That'd be a great memory for all of us.
Can I just relate a very quick,
Please.
just a general thing? I think Herb and I both never thought we would meet somebody who was as passionate about radio as I've always been, and he always, I have to use present tense, always has been. The story, and if anybody's on Facebook, they will know I recently put down how we met the first time. It was my 16th birthday, and I love to listen to WOR. I love Barry Farber, who later became a very good friend, but 16th birthday, my father was involved in advertising. In fact, my father did the original Popeil commercials with Ron Popeil's father, and my father was the one who came up with, but wait, there's more. Okay, but wait, there is more. So for my birthday, my dad arranged for me to go up to the studio and watch a taping of Barry Farber show. I knew there was a producer in the control room, and Barry, my eyes only for Barry, the studio. And I learned that an engineer was a tall, skinny guy with headphones who was twiddling the dials. All right. 5 years later, my dream to work in radio. First job, WOR. Eventually, I met Herb because at that point he was doing Bob and Ray, and I watched some of that. We went out. We became serious. And in the mid 1970s, my boss had to tell me not to walk through the halls holding hands. You're not supposed to do that. Later on, I had showed Herb a picture of, this is the dress I wore when I went up to the studio, when I was 16, and it was psychedelic, pink and orange, disgusting. And he said he remembered the dress. He was the engineer. So we actually met on my 16th birthday. 5 years later, it became real. And he was the consummate engineer, a wonderful husband, a wonderful devoted father, and he signed everything to me. Always was love, always. That was Herb. And I will share one quick thing. I treasure this, and he knows I don't know if you can see this. Can you see this? For my many moons ago, my upside down, my 45th birthday, there used to be a record label called Lori, spelled the right way, and he mocked it up with dates and numbers that resonated with us. And it was Happy Birthday from Phil Music, but spelled Phil, Phil Music and his Segway Serenaders. And then you're talking about
cool.
pilots. He signed it, Lori, have a groovy birthday, love always Herb. I've treasured this for a lot of years. Don't do the math, please.
Rod, if I can add, when you were having the vote for Engineer of the Year last year, Lori called me and said, Herb's never won anything. And I said, how could that be? And so I went to work. I called a bunch of engineers in New York. Some of you might have gotten the call. And I said, you got to nominate Herb. Not one person said why. Everybody said, absolutely. That was it. Constantly, that's all that they would say. And that says a lot. If only our other elections went that well. But that's, and That's Herb. I mean,
I think sometimes it comes down to, that politics, and politics gets in everything. But really, when we step back from that and say, hey, who truly deserves this? And let's not be political. Let's not be trying to advance an agenda or anything like that. But that was truly, I thought that was a great idea. Um, I'm glad he won that, and I'm even happier that we can now take this award and name it after him. It's a high standard to uphold. Who's next? Who would we're all here. We have time. Lori's here.
I'm happy to chime in here. And so
Please.
when I saw news of this a week ago, and Lori, my condolences. Herb was indeed a great man. And it's going to be tough, actually. Rodney said a lot of the things that I might say about the lineage with Doc and the QXR facilities, and carrying the torch when the new facility was built, when the radio station left the newspaper building, and making that a facility that it was once again a premier facility. I think that's just such an incredible testament. And I had an opportunity to work with Herb, after that, with other projects at the Empire State Building and World Trade Center, et cetera. And just a great gentleman. And I'd forgotten about some of the puns, and so I was glad to be reminded of the puns, because they were very witty, and probably a lot of them went over my head. And I'm embarrassed to say that. And so I don't know. There's a lot more to say other than he was one of the great ones in New York City radio history, and have the chapter honor him in perpetuity. I think is a wonderful thing, and so I think that was a great decision. And David. I'm not surprised to hear that no one questioned that. I don't think anybody would ever question that. That was a smart move, and so I'll leave it at that. I want to chime in. I'm sort of an absent person here in the New York community. Every now and then I'll pop in, but this was certainly one time when I wanted to be here and be part of this discussion. So thank you, and again, Lori, my thoughts are with you.
Andy, you're on our list, right?
Yeah, I am. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Good.
I'm technically a retired member. Yeah.
That's okay. And if you can make it to, up, you're in DC, if I recall.
No, I'm in central Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
I do periodically make it to New York, but not so often. But if you had something worthwhile, to try to make it happen. So
Our event in June, which I'll email details on soon, is something worthy, I think, of making the trek in for. And I'm hoping we get Rodney out there too, because we'll say something about her, which we will. But thank you for being part, and I've never worked with you directly. I know your name and your contribution to what's happened here, or what has happened in New York City over the years is is not unseen. So thank you for your effort. And you bring up Doc's name. My goodness, I met Doc early in my career, and all I can remember is yeah, 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 yeah. It's what an enthusiastic man. And here, let me throw another name out there if anybody knows this name, Henry Grossman.
oh yeah,
Okay, there we go. There we go. Going into the Wayback Machine. So that's a guy that Dave Groth introduced me to, and I remember buying equipment from him for many years.
And
Anybody else?
I got to say really quick, I did not know that Herb had visited the QXR room at Empire in December. And I know he saw it because I know he'd seen it before because he worked for DSI for a period of time, and
Right.
DSI actually contracted the room for us. So I that was also a daunting task with the amount of to rebuild that room. That was a daunting task with the amount of history that was in that room. I mean, like I didn't want to touch the room. I got to be honest with you. I did not want to touch the room. But we had to move forward, if you will, because there were actually there was a leak. There was a condensation leak from the air conditioning pan above that was above or near the old RCA transmitter. So we didn't have a chance. We had to make some changes. So we just gutted and rebuilt in place. And our next door neighbor, Dan Loesch from the early SBS days, who I reached out to, by the way, I haven't heard back from, but he worked for Herb. He built West Orange, the West Orange backup facility for Herb.
Okay.
But Dan was always a great neighbor, and we actually, um, bore a hole through the wall so that we can plumb in the RF and put in a transmitter against the wall of SBS's 97.9 at the time, SBS's transmitter room, so that we could stay on the air while they were redoing the room, the QXR room. So
Oh
that
my.
that reminds me of the community spirit that we have in this marketplace. Well, in every market among engineers in general, but New York, we always helped each other no matter what the situation was. So none of us were really alone. So it's that kind of largesse, but it was like, yeah, okay, you're rebuilding your room. Hey, let me step in. But I'm glad that Herb got to see the room in December and be able to have some remembrances of the legendary things that happened with that room. So, Lori, I'm glad you both had a chance to see that.
That was, yeah, that was so spur of the moment, Rodney, because when I heard the Lori was driving Herb in for the luncheon and we set up a table, he made it up the stairs and was able to sit down and that. And I spoke with John Frex and said, hey, why don't we take him upstairs? And he thought it was a great idea. He reached out to David Barth, and David was cool with it. And Herb had it like he had a burst of energy walking across the street and then heading upstairs. Um, when we came down the elevator and were walking towards the exit, he had to sit down a little bit while Lori was getting the car. But I do remember Lori calling him with status reports on where she was with the car and that, and in between him talking with us, he was picking up the phone and I just didn't think that would be the last time I'd really see him like that. But I am grateful that we did that, and the chapter had an event, and that he came to, and Lori especially made sure he came to. And it was just there are a few more pictures of him up there, and Bill Kirkpatrick showed him a couple of the other rooms too. So he did do a little bit of walking, but I think it was a fun day for him. And Lori, he was probably exhausted by the time he got home.
Yeah, he was, but it meant everything to him to be there, and for me too. I've been part of the engineering scene with him for so long that guilt by association.
Lori, he always talked about you, and I'm going to tell one more story. Back in around 1991, I was chief of WKDM, and on a Sunday morning, I get woken up by my staff who's yelling out "Fuego, fuego," and I didn't speak Spanish, so I didn't know what in the world they were speaking to say. And finally, the guy yells out "Fire," and I said, "Okay, I know what I have to do." I drove out to to the station, and yeah, the fire was going on. Of course, my air staff didn't know to shut it off and go outside. They're still sitting in there, and the firemen are going, "Can you get them out?" So I get them out, and we turn off the station, and the fire's finally extinguished. I lost a tower house and the catwalk, and it was devastating. And it's still Sunday morning. I pick up the phone, not to my director of engineering in the company. I call Herb. I said, pick up the phone. I said, "Hello, Mrs. Squire. Can I please speak to Herb? My radio station just burnt down." So Lori gets Herb, and Herb talks me through about getting onto low power, and then sits for hours talking me through retuning the phaser and everything for a totally new pattern and everything. And we get the station up, and of course I thank him and everything. And then I call my director of engineering at United Broadcasting. I tell him what I did. He goes, "Herb told you that? He did everything right." That's that. And that was my first interaction with Lori. I had known her for many years, but I always joke with her how many people have ever called her saying, "Excuse me, can I speak to Herb that my radio station just burnt down?"
Who's next? Anybody else have a David Antoine? Live from South Carolina, by the way. David has left New York
Yes.
and now resident down south, and wishing him that he's going to remain part of our chapter, by the way,
Absolutely.
and we'll be
All
here.
right, David.
So,
I was working for Ron Yerman out at the teleport for a period of time, and on one of my commutes from the teleport back home, I was on the FDR Drive in horrible traffic, trying to make my way from Staten Island to the Bronx, and I get a call from Herb, and he asked me, "What are you doing? What are you doing these days?" And I said, "Well, I'm working at the teleport, but kind of hating it." And he says, "Well, I need some help here at WQXR. Why don't you come in Monday and let's talk about it?" So I did, and that was the beginning of my short tenure at WQXR. At the time, Rodney was already there as Herb's assistant, and it was just a wonderful experience to go to work at QXR and at the new facility on Fifth Avenue and 17th Street, and really was one of the best analog facilities I've ever walked into, and probably ever will. And Herb was just, I knew of his reputation. I knew of him as an engineer and everything, but to actually get to work alongside him and work with Rodney at the time. I know Rodney gives me a lot of credit in mentoring him, but I felt like I was in school myself, working under Herb, and that's kind of what you felt like when you were working with Herb, that you were in school. I learned a lot. I knew a lot walking in there, but I learned a lot more working alongside Herb. Just the assignments that he gave me part-time and other things that, other daily responsibilities at QXR at the time just really solidified, my career, actually, is what I want to say. Yeah. I was another one that got the calls occasionally from Doc Masumian when, Doc was just great like that. He would call in and check up on those who were his favorites, I guess, in the market, and just see how we were doing. I have very good, fond memories of Herb Squire, and will treasure the times that I worked with him at QXR, and he will surely be missed.
May
don't
I
know who
add a
wants to
Dr.
report that.
Sumium story?
Yes, please.
Okay. Herb actually had two mentors. One was Doc, one was Leonard Kahn. Doc, a year before Doc retired, now Herb was chief engineer at WHN. Herb got a call from Doc saying, I'm planning to retire next year. I want you to succeed me. I want you to learn the whole plant and have the time. Would you consider joining the union again for a year to learn everything possible about QXR, AM, and FM for a year, work out the transmitter, work in the city? And Herb said yes. And that's exactly what happened. He left WHN, he went to QXR. He was back in, I think it was IATSE, for not quite a year, learned everything one should know as an engineer, as a chief engineer of the plant. Doc retired.
Well, Doc would be that gentleman that, that would help plan. He wouldn't leave anybody hanging. Let's put it that way.
And he was the best dressed engineer ever. I love all you guys, but you're not exactly going to win the best dressed male awards, any of you, including my husband.
You're okay, but can I, not that I'm doing anything, for anybody that was out, here's what the Martell giveaway was. So, but there was pride in that, Lori, and we should all dress the part to get that respect. And in many other markets, whether throughout the state or the country, engineers aren't respected. And some of it is, sadly, I've got to say, some of it is justified. But whenever I was in New York, there was always a level of pride. And, if you were in jeans and looking rough and raggy, it was probably because you were out at the transmitter on your knees or something dirty or something like that. And I've always told people, and in my contracting business, I told our engineers, Dockers and either a polo or a button shirt, whatever, unless we're outside and it's dirty work, whatever, then I don't care. You can wear shorts for all I care. And that makes a difference in how you get treated. And that's part of the reason why Herb was treated the way he was, why Doc was treated the way he was. And people are conditioned differently now. But I think that's still at play. If you present yourself as a professional, you are a professional. And I've always said to other engineers, to my guys and to you guys, you're doctors. You may not be an MD, but you in your own way are doctors of your facilities or whatever you are responsible for. Maintain that pride. And I always tell our younger talent coming in, think this way, because this is what you are. You'll have to earn your respect, but you have to dress the part.
But one thing that the old SBE meetings had back in the 80s and 90s, which was really great, when we used to meet at the QXR auditorium, all of us used to gather around beforehand in the cafeteria, and that's where you really learned because everyone was telling stories, and Herb always had a better story than everybody, always. but we all learned so much, and that's where I met Andy Bader and Rodney and Bob Gross and so many others. We used to all sit around and we talk about what was going on that week, and that was more of an education than anything else.
Well, it is a fraternity. It is a group here. Sadly, conditions and things are changing, so the technology is changing. But David, as you can attest to, there's still a need for people that can still walk in and understand the facility and understand whether the building blocks, and you may not know each wire, but at least you understand where to go to troubleshoot. And that's a skill that I've seen these guys have, that I've worked with in New York, that they've been able to do that. So, yeah. And Herb would know that. That was one of the things we were doing up in Westchester when I first met him. I was working on something for the WQXR facility. And what was that? WQ. I'm not sure the call sign up there, but the 90.3 in Ossining that the New York Public Radio purchased. And that's where I met Herb. And I remember asking some questions, and there he was. This is how it works. This is that. This is the, you know, we all have to know how to have the basics and understand deeper how that works. Well, that was a fun time. I was scared that day when I was driving out, and I walked out of there smiling and laughing.
And every engineer in New York was jealous of the facility he built.
He had a company that was willing to spend the money to do that and had the confidence that it could be done properly. So
I tell you that facility ruined me, because every facility that I built after that, and I think I built two after that, it had to be at certain standards. And like you talk about companies not wanting to spend money, I don't want to talk about some of the horror shows that some of us have to endure around town these days because the budgets aren't there anymore, right? Plus the cost per square foot and all of those factors. There's not the same importance placed with studio building, and who cares, right? Nobody's cracking the mic for any length of time unless you're a talk format and that type of thing. But I've been blessed that since leaving QXR, I've been able to put my stamp on a couple of facilities that were not QXR, but I can say I was proud of them and say, you know what, this was done the right way. This was done with the right considerations, the right care, that there were not corners cut in the areas that mattered and that type of thing. So that's another piece of gratitude I have in following in Herb's footsteps and learning at the learning tree.
And I have digitalized everything from the moment the raw space everything was demolished to 1890s, whatever. He videoed every step of the construction, every step. So I've got all of those on video.
And remember, the music library had the glass window in the shape of a grand piano.
Grand piano.
That's right. Yep. Yep. I think I saw Jesse trying to raise his hand a few times.
yeah, please go ahead, Jesse.
Jesse, you're muted.
Jesse, you're muted.
Yeah, it's hard to find an unmute button.
Yes, especially since the screen has been on so long. Good evening. I had the pleasure of meeting him just once, and he was part of a consulting group, team with DSI. I was working at CNN at Columbus Circle then, and they were brought in to consider putting up a new set of antennas. And I got to meet him for the first time, and I learned about his background, and then that spoke volumes, because since before the beginning of time, I was a Gene Shepard listener, and big fan. From at around the same time, I began to get interested in electronics and technology, and of course, I've learned so much since then. And you've learned from among the best. You were those of you who have whose paths have crossed like that You've really been blessed with the right way to learn this profession and to pass it on. And I totally get it. And he also thankfully had all those wonderful air checks of all the Shepherd and Bob and Ray shows too.
We still have them. They're on 10.5-inch reels in our garage. A lot of them. I'm not planning to get rid of them, but I'd like to maybe digitalize a lot of them.
Just as a side note, I work at CUNY Television. Our facility is named after Hyman Brown, who endowed, I think, the media library with a big
Mystery Theater.
Yes, right. Well, this group of fearless people were tasked with preserving all of that content. They've been working at it for years. They're still at it. Anyway, I just have warm and wonderful feelings and memories from everything that everyone has had to say about him, and I totally get it and feel it. That's all I'll say, and I'm sorry for your loss. It sounds like a unique and special thing, and I look forward to seeing you at future events this summer and so on. I relinquish the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, even for everybody here, there's 14 people on here. Even though not all of you have spoken, the fact that you're here, I think means a lot. So thank you for staying for this. Thank you for being part of this. May you take what you see here and pass it along, pass it forward. Just keep on going. This is what we should be doing and what we're about. And so thank you, Lori, for being here, and thank you for being, part of our chapter. I know this is difficult for you, but I don't know if anybody else picked up on this, but my take is Lori is a very strong woman to see what she's gone through and to be able to still put a smile on her face. And
That's us.
You're blessed, and you not only have Herb watching over you, but you have our entire group here. We're here. And I know you've got tapes that you need to digitize and things like that, and we'll communicate with the group here, and I'm sure we'll figure out a way that can get done, because there's a lot of knowledge in this group here. So
I know. And I consider myself part. I live with the man, and I had a passion for radio to begin with. I did, by the way, I produced Shepherd's show for a couple of years, and we together, Herb and I, did his syndication. And then I produced Bernie Meltzer, What's Your Problem show. Yeah, exactly. You start laughing. Yeah, I could tell all the stories you've ever heard about Bernie were true. So, and it's just that we live, eat, and breathe radio. My car license plate, NY Radio. And people say, well, what's a Jersey plate? Why does it say NY Radio? Is it because we are NY Radio? And I still, I've got to fill out, send in Herb's membership for this year, the renewal, and I intend to.
Yeah, give me, in fact, I need to follow up on that tomorrow, because Herb was he's eligible to be a life member.
I told him that years ago. He never listened to me.
Yeah.
By the way, Herb and Lori loved radio and stereo so much, they had twin daughters.
That's right. Their birth announcement said announcing a stereo production, and it showed transmitter. the towers.
Uh,
So that's what's, oh yeah, here's his, I have to
right,
fill it
there
out.
you go. Yeah, give me a couple of days on that, Lori, because
Okay.
I asked beginning of the week, and it's just everything that's going on with the Alfred antenna that I've been working with them on, and getting everything uh, getting back from NAB. I know those guys had a lot of catch up to do. But yeah, I asked the question, can we make him a life member? And I didn't quite get that response, but it was in with a bunch of other stuff too. So
Thanks. I appreciate
we've had a lot of communication, but
But
so
if you need a second signature, feel free to use mine.
thank you. No, and I appreciate that, David, and I appreciate all of your support in this. And guys, if there's anything I've learned, and Jeff Schick did this before me, there's a little bit to it, but I can tell you this: I enjoy leading this group right now from my time, and I hope to leave it in a better place. I know Andy Gladding, I hope he's still on here. I don't see him, but uh, Andy and
I'm right
I,
here.
there you are. Andy and I talk about things we can do with the group, and what we're looking at for our June event. Um, this is good stuff. So I appreciate the opportunity I have to work with you guys. And let me tell you, it's times like now where I know we can pull together and communicate and share. And even if you're just silent and not saying anything, it's okay. I'm just glad you're here and part of the group. Uh, and hopefully we'll get you out in June. So anyway, I think one last call for anybody.
Hey, Bud, if anyone is interested on YouTube, you can search out the 50th anniversary of FM Stereo or the Empire State Building. Herbst was speakers at all of those, as well as many other presentations that I did with the SBE. So,
and the AM radio improvement, that talk where the surprise at the end, what kind of radio he was using, where it sounded magnificent. He said it was an old radio, not a 1980s radio, an old radio. And I'm going to do the spoiler. Which I have right near me right now. It was a RCA radio built in 1923. Sounded cleaner and better, but you'll hear it if you look that up. I think on might be on NPR or the NYC's site that they do have the audio of his whole talk.
Oh wow!
It's worth listening to. I'm prejudiced, but it's worth listening to.
There are plenty of Herb Squire talks on the web, the ones that I produced and ones that others produced.
War of the Worlds.
Yes, the last presentation Herb did with me was the War of the 80th anniversary of the War of the Worlds.
Well, I will. You're talking about AM stereo. I was one of those guys that bought that Sony AM stereo radio that would pick up all the systems, and I still have it. And I remember playing around and listening to QXR saying, "Oh my goodness!" QXR when I was on 1560, not QEW. It was still classical at that time, if I recall. Wow, and Laura, you're right. AM radio was able pre-NRSC could sound good way back then, and a lot of those old tube radios did that. And QXR, AM, and then QEW were some of the best sounding AM stations for their formats. But I just remember hearing stereo and AM. And then at some point I remember hearing stereo on TV, and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And I don't know, it just wasn't as exciting to me as AM stereo and what it did. Not that it's anywhere now, but what are you going to do?
So
Everybody, thank you for joining. Andy, we never got your report, but
there's not really much to report that we haven't really covered already. I think that more words are unnecessary, other than to say that I just would like to just thank the response I've gotten so far from people that keep poking around about the Alfred antenna bays, that keep side chatting me to see if one can fall off the back of the truck. And there's people on this call that are guilty of that. But right now, the truck is locked. But, I would say maybe a nice donation to the Andy Gladding Hofstra University Pizza Party Fund. We can make that happen. But no, seriously, we're very excited about this. I think it's going to be really cool. And Bud and I, let's put it this way. Bud and I, if we weren't excited about it, we wouldn't have manually moved those 17 hunks of junk over to the over to where they're currently resting at their unidentified locations. So we're pretty psyched. This is going to be great.
And put one of them in the lobby of Dempster Hall.
I like I said. I mean, a donation will have to be made to the SBE Educational Scholarship Fund. I'm sure John Mullen will be very excited to peel off money for that.
Everybody, thank you very, very much.
Thanks for joining us. Please remember to subscribe to SBE 15 New York City.